see. Good afternoon. My name is Sandy Damon, and I am the Adult Program Coordinator of the Pine Bush Area Public Library. Today we're going to be speaking with Nate Storaska, who is a junior at Valley Central High School, and he is a falconer. Correct?
Yep.
Thank you for joining us today, Nate.
My pleasure.
I'm glad to hear that. We're really honored to have you because this is an interesting subject that most people don't know anything about. I want to ask you a couple of questions and give our patronage some idea of what it is to work with raptors. What is the purpose of falconry?
So falconry has had a lot of purposes over the years. So it started several thousand years ago in sort of Asian countries, so Mongolia, the Middle East, places like that, as a way to secure food. So people would form bonds with these creatures, and they would essentially use them to hunt. They were used similarly to tools, and it's a symbiotic relationship. So we provide game for the birds that we have. So we'll flush whatever quarry they need to take, and they'll of course take it. And we'll typically split whatever we have with the birds. In my case, I don't do as much of that. Most of what I have caught with my bird has gone to her. So she has caught a couple of things that I've tried, but for the most part, she eats most of what she takes. Nowadays, it's more of a sport of entertainment. So now we go into the field and we watch the spectacle of the bird taking their quarry. It's still a nice experience nowadays. It has a little bit shifted in purpose from a way to obtain food to a bit more of a sport now, but
It's a very different sport.
certainly.
And what is your bird's name?
I've named her Blaze.
Blaze. And Blaze is a falcon?
She is a red-tailed hawk.
Red-tailed hawk. Okay. How did you get interested in this type of sport?
So a couple of years ago, my family took a trip to Ireland, and we stayed in a hotel who had facilities. They had, I think, Harris hawks, quite a few owls, some falcons. It was pretty nice. We went on a walk and called the Harris hawks down to our fist a couple times. That was interesting. And they actually hunted the birds too, so they would have ferrets and dogs flush game for the birds, and they would occasionally have hunts for people to watch. So it was interesting.
Do you have to have a license?
You do need a license, yeah. So there are 3 classes of license in New York. There's apprentice, general, and master. With each new order, you can have more birds and more responsibilities. So as an apprentice, I need my sponsor to be present for most of the activities I do. I can go hunting on my own and take care of day-to-day activities. My sponsor needs to be present if I'm going to be presenting my bird, or if I want to upgrade my license so that I can have more responsibility, more independence. I can have a few falconers evaluate my performance in the field, and eventually I'll be able to work my way up to a higher class of license.
How do you get a sponsor?
So when you take the New York State Falconers examination, which is a 100-question test, out of which you need an 80% success, you need to call. There's a list of sponsors that they'll have. So
Okay.
there's names and where they live approximately. So you'll sort of find your region of the department and find who can sponsor. You can call a couple numbers, figure out who's the best equipped to deal with you. And
So is there local sponsors? Is your sponsor local?
my sponsor lives pretty close. He lives in Goshen, I think. So it's
And to be a sponsor, do you have to be a master?
General and Master Falconers can both be sponsors. So I think the maximum is 5 apprentices that they can take on. So they need
Okay.
to.
Interesting. Can you take your red-tailed hawk, Blaze, out in the public, like to school, to the mall?
So if I was going to be doing a talk about conservation, the DEC does allow for the use of hunting birds for conservation purposes. So if I were to schedule like a discussion, I would need a general or master falconer present to sort of watch my performance, and I could theoretically take my bird to a presentation.
So when you say conservation, are you talking about any particular animal that's going to be flushed for the birds to catch?
It's more about the conservation of raptors. They actually were in a bit of danger a while ago as a result of the DDT that was being used. That's actually why the raptor populations declined, but nowadays we are slowly bringing them back up. So that's sort of the conservation I would be talking about.
Okay. So when you're home and Blaze is home with you, where does Blaze stay and what kind of attention does she need?
So we, as falconers, we need to meet requirements for a facility called a muse. We built, it's almost like a shed in our backyard. She needs an 8 cubic foot area to be in, proper perch requirements, easy ability to clean. So you need to be able to have a nice sterile place, free of illnesses. She stays there, and there's a few requirements for a weathering yard as well. So that would be an outside enclosure for her to stay in.
Okay, what do they eat when they're home?
So she eats pretty much meat, bones, fur. She'll sort of throw up any indigestible things. So sometimes bones, fur, she'll get rid of, but for the most part, it's really just meat. We feed her chicken, some venison. We've fed her squirrel, partridge, pheasant. So she has a wide variety of different things she can eat.
Do they have a big appetite when they're home?
It depends. Occasionally, if she's at a little bit of a lower weight, she'll be more hungry than if she's just hunted and sort of eaten her fill. So if we're trying to get her ready to hunt, sometimes we'll bring her weight down a little bit so that she can perform as well as I know she can. So the same way that an athlete would not binge right before like a big race that they had. So it's about weight management. She does need to have the right build. She can't have too much fat at any one time, otherwise she's not going to perform as well as she can.
So they have to be hungry when you take them out?
Yes.
Okay. Were you able to train her to return to you, or is it a challenge to get her to come back to you?
So early we need to get her to come to the glove. So we start at short distances and then we work our way up to longer distances, and now we are able to call her pretty much down from high trees, things like that, across the field if we need to. We have something called the lure, which is most people use like either a pouch or like a fur lure, and they'll put a piece of meat on it and they'll swing it and present it for the bird, and they'll usually come a long distance for the lure because it's such a large piece of meat.
Huh. Wow. So they'll come back to you, but are they trained to bring their catch back?
No, most of the things that my bird takes are a little bit large for her to take back, so she wouldn't be able to pick up like a squirrel or a large bird, for instance. Typically I just make my way to her, and sometimes I'll help with subduing whatever she's caught, and then I will basically trade off. So I'll call her to the glove and take the food and her back to the car, and then we'll head home. So.
All right, so they'll eat squirrels.
Yeah.
And I'm sure moles and little rodents. Rabbits?
Yeah.
woodchucks?
I haven't seen it, but I'm sure it happens.
What's the biggest thing that Blaze has attempted to eat?
I'd say probably a pheasant. So she goes after things that are wild and also things that we've purchased from game farms. So there are game farms that raise game birds for shotgun hunting. We sometimes buy a few of those and then release them in the field for her to catch. So
A pheasant, huh? That's a pretty big bird. Are owls ever used as birds of prey?
I've seen them used, yeah. They're not commonly used. Falconry is mostly about the hunting of eagles, falcons, and hawks. But I mean, certainly owls can be used. They're typically used more for conservation than hunting itself, but it's certainly a thing that I've seen.
Where do you get a hawk or a falcon to train and use?
So of course you need the proper permits and licenses, but you can purchase them from a breeder, or you can purchase them from someone who just catches birds from the wild. My sponsor actually he goes up to the mountains every year and catches them on the migration, which is typically how it's supposed to be done. When they're passage birds, they're a lot easier to train, so passage is on their first migration. So first year birds are able to be taken by apprentices, and that's pretty much the extent of my ability. But we use traps that are engineered so that they don't harm the bird, and we can safely take the bird home and begin the training.
Interesting. So you have to expend money for this, I'm sure. How much money and how much time needs to be invested in this sport?
So it depends upon how much you can do on your own. So we actually didn't pay for people to come in and build the muse. We did it ourselves. We sort of went to Lowe's, got some plywood and lumber, and were able to build it on our own. Most of the things in the sport you can also make yourself if you have, you just buy a bit of leather, you can cut some of the equipment that you need. There are very few things that you need to purchase after you've already built the muse. That, I think, would be the most expensive thing, is the facilities. And then after that, the equipment can be bought from online retailers.
Harnesses or whatever the proper term is used for what they, like a leash thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, so I have a lot of property. Can I invite falconers to hunt on my property?
Absolutely. We love to be invited anywhere. It's very hard to find good game land nowadays. So especially this season, it seems to be very difficult to find game for my bird. I mean, we go out quite often, and sometimes we just come back with nothing because of how low the squirrel population is right now. But if you have a lot of good property, that would be absolutely something we would appreciate.
The squirrel population is not low at my house. Is it ethical to take the birds from the wild to do this?
Yes, there's been a lot of studies done about the impact of falconry on wild populations, and it's typically very positive, just because we are able to take birds from the wild who have a very, very low chance of survival. I think something like 80% of birds die in their first year just because of how difficult it is to survive as a raptor. But some falconers will take a bird and train it pretty much for a whole year and release it at the end of the season, and they're basically a perfect second year bird that's had time and help from a falconer to grow and mature, and it tends to be very, very good for the population. So.
Well, that's interesting. I wonder how a trained bird gets along with the untrained birds. Oh, they don't fly in packs.
There are some birds that work together. So Harris hawks, they're a western bird, will tend to work together pretty much as a pack. Sometimes they'll go and flush squirrels or whatever the birds that are a round will take, and one bird will go in and flush quarry, and then the others will take. They're very, very smart birds.
Excuse me. Sorry. Well, you answered my next question. Do the birds ever go back to the wild? So we've covered that. Well, let me ask you one last question, Nate. What are the responsibilities of being a falconer?
So daily I need to feed my bird, weigh her, I need to figure out how much to feed her based on her weight, and I need to figure out what type of meat to feed her. Like some meats are more rich than others, so if she's a little bit low I might feed her venison as opposed to something like squirrel, which doesn't have as much nutritional value. It's a lot of data collection and calculation. So.
And you have to report this to the DEC?
So every year I need to submit a report of the game that my birds caught, what types of birds I've had, and the activities that I've done with them. So catches, releases, losses, deaths, pretty much all of that I need to report to the DEC.
Okay, thank you. What else can you tell us that I haven't covered?
Well, nothing much. I mean, falconry is a really good sport for wild populations. I think it's you know, a very interesting experience. So you know, people who think they want to get into it, you sort of have to have the right mindset, time, energy, patience. It takes a lot to work with these birds because they are wild animals. So I mean, if you think that falconry is the right thing for you, you can look at the tests. There's study guides online where you can apply for. The tests are in April and August, I believe, for the DEC. So it's definitely a good sport.
Okay, and I understand we're going to have some videos. You're going to provide us with some videos so we can see Blaze in action.
Of course, yes.
And I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us about this. It's fascinating.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
She sees it. Here she comes.
Yes. It's a fantastic day.
Yep. That's it. She's coming.
Oh yeah, let's go.
She got it.
Oh, that was a
That was something.
That was the most awesome thing I've ever seen in my life.
Did you get the close-up of it?
Yeah.
She came down on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the coolest thing.
Yep. Good girl, Blaze. Yep, here she comes. She's coming. Wow, did she nail that one?
All right.
That could not have been a better shot.